Very good evening to everyone. I, Advocate Ramandeep Singh Bagra, on behalf of Indian Law Institute State Unit, welcome you all to this interactive session on practice and changes in BNSS, that is Bharatiya Nyaya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, which has been enacted in 2023 by the Parliament with a view to bringing reforms to the criminal procedure law being followed in our honorable courts of our country. Now, first of all, I would like to welcome our panelists for today's session who took out some valuable time from their schedules to be a part of the session. First of all, we have Advocate Manish Soni and Advocate Artik R. Karthike and Advocate Aman Pal. And we also have Mr. Bhagwant Singh Rayad, DSP Punjab Police, who is a decorated police officer who has been in this profession for a long time. And I would also like to welcome the members of the Bar Association who have joined us today here. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Manish Soni, who would be speaking on the topics time blocking procedures under BNSS and efficient justice delivery, and the core idea behind timely information to the complainant under section 193 subsection 2 of BNSS. So over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to address to this young gathering of legal minds. Today, I am going to address you on two topics. One is the time block of procedures under BNSS and efficient justice delivery system. Second is core idea behind providing timely information to the complainant under section 193(2) of BNS. So first is the time block of the procedures under BNSS. Now once we are entering into new era of enactment of new criminal laws, BNSS, where we have repealed the CRPC. Earlier the problem under the CRPC was that the prisoners there was a prolonged custody of prisoners, the trials were delayed, it was taking many years to complete the trials and investigation and other procedures. Now to address those issues and those problems, this BNSS has introduced time framework at every level of a procedure. So once we are talking about the procedures, let us know what are the procedures under the criminal law. Under the criminal law, the procedure starts from first of all by the filing of a complaint by the informant or a victim or a complainant. Then the next will be the registration of the FIR so far as the offences under the cognisable offence is concerned. Then the investigation part by the police, then the filing of charge sheet by the police, framing of charges by the court, then the evidence part, as last is the judgment delivery by the court. So first of all, we'll start with this filing of a complaint by the informant or a complainant before the police. Now we will be taking this issue as so far as the cognisable offences are concerned. Earlier in the CRPC, there was no time frame for any preliminary inquiry to be concluded prior to registration of the FIR. Now at that time, the Honorable Supreme Court addressed this issue. The 5 judges bench of the Honorable Supreme Court in Lalita Kumari has addressed this issue and has made a mandatory that in certain cases where the preliminary inquiry is required, like in matrimonial, corruption, economic offences, such like offences, the preliminary inquiry be completed within a period of 7 days by the police. Now those 7 days, the preliminary inquiry, the purpose was to ascertain whether the offences are cognisable or non-cognisable. If it is cognisable, then the FIR has to be registered. The report of preliminary inquiry has to be submitted within 7 days. Later on, that judgment was modified in 2014 and that time period was extended to 15 days. So now in the new BNSS Act, there is a time frame of 7 days, but that time frame is only for the offences which are punishable from 3 years to maximum of 7 years. So only in offences under 3 years to 7 years, the police can conduct preliminary inquiry, and that too within a maximum period of 14 days they have to submit this report of preliminary inquiry. That has been prescribed under section 173(3) of this BNSS. Now once there is a FIR pursuant to this preliminary inquiry or otherwise on a complaint filed by a complainant or otherwise, now then the process of investigation starts, where either the police can arrest a person if so required, the accused, or they can conduct the investigation without the arrest of the accused, depending upon the offence and the allegations. Now once they will arrest an accused, the accused will be arrested either by the police or in certain exceptional cases by a private person. once a private person arrests an accused, then as per the this act of BNSS, he has to be presented to the nearest police officer or a police station within a period of 6 hours by a private person, and by the police before a magistrate within 24 hours as under the old regime of CRPC. Now then, next coming to this part of investigation. In the investigation there is another timeline that in a sexual offences where the medical examination of a victim of a rape is conducted, then the medical practitioner has to submit the report within a 7 days of maximum 7 days to the police officer. And then the investigation, we come to the part of this detention of an accused and this part of completion of the investigation. The detention of the accused earlier was in CRPC under section 167. That was maximum 15 days. Now here also it is 15 days, but now it is extended in parts also, subject to 40 days and 60 days depending upon the offence, whether it is punishable more than 10 years or less than 10 years. On that issue my friend will be addressing you. That will be another topic here. And so far as the investigation is to be completed now, after the collection of this evidence and the entire completion of investigation part, the police will be submitting the charge sheet without unnecessary delay, normally 90 days in case the offence is less than punishable more than 10 years. Now the issue here is that there is a special provision under section 193(2) where the second topic also covers that. So I am covering the second topic in this first issue also. That provides that in fact under section 193 there are two time limits. One time limit is that in cases where the offence is under the POCSO section 4, 6, 8, 10 or 68 to 71 under the BNS, those are relating to rape, gang rape, rape of minor, the investigation has to be completed within a maximum time period of 2 months, 60 days. Now thereafter another provision is there, 193(2), that provides the timely information to the informant. The word used is informant, not the complainant, because the complainant is a different term. The informant is the person who lodges an FIR, we can say he is the informant, or gives an information to the police. So within a period of 2 months, either through the electronic communication or a mode or through any other process by which the state government prescribes, they have to give an information within a 90 days, maximum of a 90 days to the informant about the progress of the investigation. So the progress of the investigation will be only when they are not going to file charge sheet, they need some more time to complete the investigation. So here it is a bounden duty of the police to inform the informant after 90 days that what steps they have taken, what progress is there of the trial. It is primarily to associate the informant or a complainant or a victim in this investigation process. Earlier in the CRPC there was no role of the complainant or an informant in the investigation. There was no information available to him or her. Either they have to take information under RTI or sometime through other means or courts under 156(3) or other provisions. But now here a specific provision has been provided by the legislature so that a victim or informant can be joined at the time of investigation. He should be apprised of the progress and he is made the integral part of the investigation, because the police is made, it is made incumbent upon the police to inform the informant or a victim after a period of 90 days. So this system, this provision has been envisaged so as to bring more transparency and to bring efficiency in the system, so that the evidence which the prosecution has collected, the investigating agency has collected, that can be brought into the knowledge of the informant and he can add it to it, or he can provide additional inputs and he will be aware of these steps already taken by the police in first 90 days. Now coming on to the other time frames under BNS, once the police files a charge sheet after completion of the investigation, the next part is committal of proceedings when the offence is triable by the session court. So far as the committal of the proceedings are concerned, the new section that deals with it is under section 232. Here, because earlier under the CRPC there was no time limit for any procedure. So the procedure is that once the police files a charge sheet, if the offences are triable by the session, they have to be committed by the magistrate to the session court. Earlier there was no time limit and the matter kept on lingering for months, for the years. Now everything is in the time frame, there is fixed framework, structure framework for every procedure. So the legislature has intentionally added a time period of maximum 180 days under section 232 for the committal of a case to the session court when the offences are triable by the session court. Then next comes after the committal of the case is the cognizance by the magistrate or a session court. The cognizance then starts with the framing of a charges. When the magistrate or a session court, the trial court applies its mind to the allegations. Earlier there was no time frame for framing of a charges. Here in the new act under BNSS there are two time frame by the legislature. One for framing of charges by the court, that is within 60 days from the committal. So 180 days for the committal, further 60 days for framing of a charge by the session court or a trial court. Now supposingly the accused wants to challenge, wants to seek his discharge on the grounds, various grounds including the offences made out or other grounds, then there is a time limit for the accused also. At the same very point of time, the accused has to file an application within a period of 30 days under the section 272, because after this committal of the proceedings, there is a fixed time frame for the accused also. So for the court also, within 60 days, the accused has to seek discharge within 30 days. And so on, it goes on. Then comes the other procedural frameworks. I will be addressing only on the major issues. So I have addressed on this issue of filing of preliminary inquiry, then investigation, then charge sheet, then this committal, framing of charges, then comes the recording of the evidence. Now after recording of the evidence, the last concluding part comes to the judgment. Earlier in the criminal side, there was no time limit for a judge to pronounce the judgment or to any time frame to issue the judgment, pass the judgment of conviction or otherwise. Here in this new BNSS Act, the legislature has provided a maximum time limit of not later than 45 days. So 45 days is the maximum time limit under section 392(1) of a judge to pronounce a judgment or pass a judgment at the termination of a trial or at any subsequent date not exceeding this 45 days of time period. So this entire framework, starting from the beginning for the police, for the courts, has been embodied in this BNS to address this issue of delay in trials, the unnecessary incarceration of the accused in the custody, and to provide an efficient justice delivery system, because the basic principle of law is justice delayed is justice denied. So to address that issue, that justice be provided within a limited time framework. At every stage, a specific time frame is there for the courts, for the investigating agency, for the accused also. And for those grounds, the accused can also challenge the proceedings, the complainant can also come to the court. So in this new BNSS, to provide an efficient justice delivery time in the justice delivery in a shortest possible time, the provisions have been made at every stage. So that's it. Rest my friends will be addressing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable inputs. Now, moving ahead, we have Mr. R. Karthikeyan, who would be enlightening us about changes in procedure for further investigation under BNSS, and if is it mandatory to collect forensic evidence and videography under section 176 subsection 3 of BNSS. So over to you, sir.
I welcome all of you for this. When we start this concept of considering the new legislations, the caption of it is the change. First, we must understand what was the need for the change. The change here is because we were suffering with the draconian laws which were framed by the British government at that time, which did not have any balance of the rights of the accused vis-a-vis the right of the complainant, and of course Article 21, which never existed. It is for this reason that when the Parliament brought in this bill, for the first time the introduction was made as a tribute to one of the oldest freedom fighters of India, who was hanged on 8th August 1908. An 18-year-old boy was extradited by the British government that time. So considering those aspects, the government brought in this bill, and whatever were the loopholes in the earlier investigation or the rights of the accused now find plugged in under this new legislation. Earlier we had a trend that when a final report is to be presented, there was no definite time period. Investigations used to go on for time longs and long, and for years together there was no charge sheet file and a man would be kept under the ordeal of an FIR pending. Manish sir has just clarified as to how those timelines have been blocked now, where the rights of the accused vis-a-vis the right of the victim have both been balanced. Now under the new legislation, whenever a challan is to be presented or a final report is to be presented, there is a period prescribed, and in that period of 90 days, in case there is no mechanism which is put forth by the investigating officer, the magistrate within his own limitations has the right to apply and decide that the further investigation may be stopped. So the word there is stop. That means that there would be a situation where investigation is not being taken ahead to a logical conclusion, and the magistrate will put brakes on the investigation, allowing the person who is facing the ordeal to get rid of the investigating process. But it also says that there has to be a satisfaction recorded in case he permits the investigation to go in ahead of those 90 days period. Now this satisfaction recorded is vested in the judicial authorities. What it does is it balances the rights of the accused against any atrocity, unfair investigation by the police authorities, or deliberate delay, which we have seen happening in this country for so many years, and there have been judicial precedents to that effect. Delay in trials, delay in investigations, which has been blocked now by this very chapter. Again, in case the investigation is stopped by the magistrate, the rights of the investigating agencies are still revived. They have a right to go to the sessions court, and again the sessions court will also apply its mind, and satisfaction would be recorded whether further investigation is to be permitted or not. But in case no cogent reason comes forward, the delay is unjustified, it is not explained, the investigations comes to a stop. That means the ordeal of the man stops and the investigation has come to an end. This was a fact which was completely lacking in the earlier procedure. If we go back to the old CRPC days, if a challan is not filed, the only remedy is that one would rush to the High Court, ask for the investigation to be made time bound, and that is it. But now those powers have been given to the magisterial courts and to the sessions court, which makes life better for the person who is suffering this investigation procedure. And that is why if we see, because that is the second topic which comes in here, it is related to the custody of a person. If the Act gives them the right to hold people which are punishable for offences for more than 7 years for 90 days, it also empowers the judicial officer concerned to see whether that custody of 90 days is required or not. 15 days period as prescribed under the earlier laws still stands and hold force. The only difference is it can be split up into parts. And then there has to be a justification recorded as to why a person is to be detained for a period of 90 days or above. For the smaller offences, it is again 60 days. But this Act makes a balance of the right of the prosecution vis-a-vis the right of the accused persons. If we are introducing forensic sciences and other investigating modes into our new procedural code, this Act puts a balanced mechanism wherein the police officer concerned will now have to justify the reasons as to why he further wants to investigate the person by detaining him in police custody. The police diaries, which were earlier part of the old procedure, are still not admissible in the new code also, but now they are under the scrutiny of the judicial officers concerned. So this makes a lot of things practically possible, that the police would not have the right to do whatever they want. Everything would be codified in a manner where the officer concerned who is examining the trial is virtually monitoring the trial in these cases. The investigation would be completely monitored from the date a person is produced till the submission of the final report. And this is something which is completely new to this concept, and Article 21, to my understanding, is well protected under this very code. We may also see that the restriction of the police custody or the presentation of supplementary challan are another two aspects which are given to the investigating agencies to protect their rights. They can always bring in a supplementary challan with the permission of the court. And as Manish sir had said, this supplementary challan is also again codified with the bracket of 90 days. Within 90 days, the investigating officer would explain as to what is the fresh evidence that has come in form of statement, in form of documents, or whatever is the new link evidence. It cannot be a case where he can bring in stale evidence and say that now I want to improve my challan, I want to improve my final report by something which has now cropped up to my mind. So the introduction of new evidence in the form of supplementary challan protects the right of the investigator vis-a-vis the accused, that it should be fresh and new for the process to come in, and only then that challan can come on board. Similar would be the situation with police custody also. Justification of police custody is one of the prerequisites in this very new code. Earlier, police custodies were taken just as a routine. Any person who is presented for police remand would generally be sent to police remand by a magistrate without much application of mind. But now satisfaction and recording of reasons is the prerequisite for sending any person to police custody. If it is split up police custody or a joint one, the order would narrate the reasons and the basis for sending him to police custody, which is something I would say would be the best way to show a person what is the acquisition against him, what is the purpose of investigation, and doesn't leave much room for the investigating authorities to in a way play foul with the allegations in the case and the custody of the accused. Section 176, which is the best and the most landmark provision in this new code, provides for forensic examination, which is another very important facet of this. There is a lacuna, if I see in that as a common student of law. It says that whenever such investigation agency collects material, he is required to record it either in a mobile phone or any other electronic device. I beg to differ with this because the mobile phone recording is something which I don't find would be very sustainable in a longer period of time, because mobile devices are prone to be, they may fall foul for some virus or may have been stolen or may become a lost property. And then again the issues of primary and secondary evidence would crop up. So it says ideally it should be from a mobile phone or any other electronic device, which I feel probably this would require a revisit at some time later, that the investigating agencies should be given with specific electronic devices which are meant only for this purpose, so that the original footages, especially in cases where statements have to be recorded, crime scene are to be preserved, stand in that primary source which can be used for the course of investigating. An investigating officer changes, his mobile phone changes, and that handicap will always come in place when the evidence is to be tested on the degree of being primary or secondary. What I could not understand, and in the debates before the parliament also, nobody has examined this issue as to why mobile phones have been mandated. There could be other electronic sources also which could be discreetly used by the investigating agency so that they are not prone to tampering or any other mode. It is also evident in the entire proceedings that now the mandate of the law in the new code is that even statements of the complainant, especially those which are female related offences, are to be video recorded. And for the females, the video recording is to be done in the presence of their family or guardians or any place of their choice, including their residence. So video recording and making the things conducive for them is one of the greatest benchmarks of this legislation which has achieved, and makes it very conducive for a complainant to put forth his or her version, or a victim to put his or her version before the authorities in a video recorded format. But again, this repeated word of using mobile phones is something which I don't understand why it has been repeated time and again over here, because it could be general electronic evidence only which could be used for recording rather than mobile phones. One aspect which was considered when this legislation was tabled in the parliament is, when we say forensic examination, it also carries a caption that it is giving the state governments 5-year time for providing the forensic setup for the investigating purposes. It also says that as long as that 5-year purpose is not available, they can borrow this infrastructure from the other states. One of the members of parliament during the debate had raised a very vital issue which needs to be addressed before this code can actually show its true colors of improving the entire procedure. We still do not have the proper forensic ballistic experts in the country. Our labs are not technically acquainted with manpower as well as infrastructure. We still have deficient infrastructure in most of the states. Even today, if we have a FSL lab report to come in an ordinary case, maybe of an NDPS or an ordinary case of murder or otherwise, it takes ages for a report also to come. In this scenario, it's very difficult to expect a forensic team to visit a site at that very moment and examine and gather the evidence as the Act proposes, because this objective cannot be achieved till I have the infrastructure. The best possible example that one can see is in that unfortunate case of rape of that medical student in the RG Kar case. The entire crime scene had been changed. If this act was to be implemented in letter and spirit, then that forensic team should have visited along with the investigating team at that very moment to preserve the crime scene. What happens today is that these legislations are creating a situation where it looks good, but till the execution of it does not happen, the objective is lost. Forensic is a very important ingredient that has been introduced in this. Of course, the CRPC could not even contemplate at that stage that there would be something like forensic science. Making it mandatory, making it important piece of evidence, but yet forensic will only go if the rules are framed by the state government. So this is one more aspect which is a grey area in the legislation that the central government has left, that for this forensic part, it would be the state governments which will be framing rules, which again puts it in the same red tapist category, that as long as those rules are not framed, the forensic examinations will not take place and the entire objective would be defeated. So what the legislature has contemplated to expedite, as Manish sir had just pointed out, at every point we have a bracket for the investigating agency. The state must also cope up with the same situation to ensure that they have adequate infrastructure to the investigating agency so that 90 days time period is not locked out. If the investigator does not get a forensic report of an case for 90 days, his hands are tied and he can't present an investigation report. So the Act, of course, mandates a forensic report. It says for recording of audio statements at every level of the complainant, of the victim, but at the same point of time, in the absence of the rules, and this forensic examination would be virtually a futile exercise, it would not lead to any results.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed very informative. Now, moving on to our third panelist, Mr. Amanpal. Sir will be speaking on under trials and bail under Section 479 of BNSS and balancing the right to bail and powers of investigating agencies with a special focus on extended duration of police custody and establishment.
Hi, good evening everyone. So I've been given a mandate today to speak on two topics. The first one would be the provisions of the new BNSS, that is 479, section 479, that talks of the maximum period for which an under trial can be kept in prison. So we need to understand what is the basic, what is the background of to understand the provision, we need to understand the background and the reason as to why such a provision was introduced. So in the year 2013, there was a letter which was written by our former Chief Justice of India, Mr. Justice R.C. Lahoti, to the Supreme Court, whereby it was highlighted that the conditions of the under trials in the prisons are pathetic. The prison workers are under-trained or not trained at all, and the conditions, overall conditions in any case, besides being overcrowded, are inhuman. So after that letter was written, a suo motu cognizance was taken by the Honorable Supreme Court to ensure and to monitor the conditions in the jails. So I believe that was one of the reasons why this new provision has been introduced in the Act, which talks of the maximum period for which an under trial can be put in the jail or can be kept in the jail, so that the overcrowded jails are decongested. And there are certain conditions which have also been put in this section. I'll just take every one of you through the provisions of this section. The very first section, the very first subsection of 479, it says that if any person has already undergone half of his sentence, maximum sentence which is prescribed under the offences for which he is being tried, he shall be granted bail. So these provisions have been made mandatory. Of course, it comes with some provisos which are also mentioned in the section itself, that if the person is, there are certain concessions which have been given to certain under trials. It says that in case a person is a first time offender, so some more concession has been given to him, he need not spend half the time in jail, he can spend only 1/3 time and he shall be granted bail in that case. Second proviso is, even if the court feels that even after a person has undergone half the sentence, but the nature of the offence or the way it has been committed is heinous or which does not entitle him to bail, that discretion can be exercised by the courts and they can be granted or denied bail irrespective of the period which has been prescribed under subsection 1. It also says, which I would come to this part later as well, there is another proviso. It says that this period of half the sentence and 1/3 of some sentence would not apply to the under trials where there are more than one offences involved or where there are multiple offences involved. So the legislature here has failed to define multiple offences or more than one offences, because in a country like India, see, in case I'll give you an example as to how these provisions, this provision particularly, is a little unfair. In case a person is being tried for an offence for which the maximum sentence is only 3 years, and he commits during this period, he commits another offence for which he is being tried and maximum sentence for that offence is also 3 years. So there are multiple cases against him. So he cannot come out, he cannot take the benefit of this provision. But a person who is being tried and who is a first time offender, who is being tried for an offence for which the maximum sentence is 10 years, he can still avail the benefit of this provision. So there is some imbalance which needs to be revisited as far as this provision is concerned. So this multiple cases or more offences than one, this needs to be either defined by the courts or there has to be some explanation which needs to come in the near future. There is another provision which is a very welcome provision, that is subsection 3 of 479 of BNSS itself, which says that in case the superintendent of a jail comes to know that a person has already undergone 1/3 or 1/2 of the total sentence, which is maximum sentence which is prescribed, he can always make an application to the court on behalf of that under trial person. The court then, of course, after considering the application, can grant bail to that person. So now the power has also been, there are so many persons in the jails who do not know about their rights, who are languishing behind the jails for no reason because they do not know as to whether they have completed half the sentence. They are illiterate people. There is no, I would say, legal help that they get in the jails. So in such a situation, the superintendent of police, who is of course, who knows law, can always move an application on behalf of such persons. This has been, these provisions have been introduced only in order to see, there was a study in 2022 by one of the state agencies whereby it was stated that in the Indian jails there are 77% of the persons who are there in Indian jails, they are all under trials. So people who are yet to be convicted, 77% of those people are inside the jail. So the persons, they are the ones who are overcrowding the prisons. They are the ones who are to be given certain rights so that we decongest the jails at least, and this provision really helps in decongesting such situations. So I can think of a couple of things which really helps in making things better for the under trials because of this provision. Number one would be, again, it will help in decongesting. Overcrowding is a huge problem in the country like India, where we have touched almost 150 now, 150 crores. Then of course it would encourage speedy trials. So any person, the prosecution would also want that any person who is facing trial, the trial should be finished so that he does not take the benefit of such provisions, and the speedy trials would be encouraged. Of course, first time offenders are also given some solace because of these provisions. 1/3 sentence in case they have undergone, they can always be granted bail. And with all the positive things, there are certain negative things also which comes along with it. So one of the things that I really feel that needs to be addressed is multiple offences, as I just discussed. Plus there is there's another thing. So I was reading the provisions of this this section. The very first section says that if a person has undergone half the sentence except for the offences where the punishment provided is life imprisonment or death sentence. So there are certain sections where the provision provides for life imprisonment normally, but generally, but normally as a matter of practice, courts never reward or award that life imprisonment. Like I can give you an example. Section 304 of the old IPC, that is culpable homicide not amounting to murder. In case, you must have noticed that maximum sentence which is awarded in such like matters is around 10 years. Another provision that I can think of is section 467, it prescribes life imprisonment, but I have never in my career, I haven't seen any person being awarded life imprisonment for an offence under 467. So all these persons who are facing trials under, say, these sections, they are excluded, they cannot take benefit of this section. So this life imprisonment, excluding such persons from the benefit of this section, again, I believe needs to be revisited. So of course, yes, this is a welcome step, and change is always welcome, as my friend Karthikeya said. And I really like the quote. It is one of my favorite quotes. It says that marked by its ubiquity and antiquity, the only thing that is permanent in this world is change. So yes, this is a very welcome change, and let's hope that yes, a balance is created, and people like you and me, we argue such matters in the court, and these provisions are interpreted in a manner which benefits the system, benefits the under trials, because it is a purposive interpretation which needs to be given to this this provision. Now the second mandate which was given to me is a little tricky. It says right to bail and powers of investigating agencies, a special focus to custody. So most of the times, most of my career I have been on the defense side. I have been practicing on the defense side, except for a little stint of 1.5 years when I was in the Advocate General's office. So I tend to tilt towards the protection of the persons who have been accused of certain offences or who have been facing trial. So right to bail, of course, that is why it intrigued me a little, the provisions. Section 187 of BNSS, it provides and it talks of right to bail and the powers of investigating agency. So as my friend Mr. Manish has already touched this issue. Earlier the police custody could be granted only for 15 days. it could be granted for the 15 days, and it was a mandate that these 15 days police custody can be granted in the first 15 days of an arrest of a person. So now that trend has changed. In fact, there was a judgment in 2023, Vikas Shukla's judgment, CBI versus Vikas Shukla, whereby the Honorable Supreme Court tilted towards the prosecution and said that these 15 days can span over, it can go beyond 15 days also. But in the provisions under section 187, it says that the police custody, once, earlier the regime was that once police custody has been declined, or if it is over and a person is sent to judicial custody, he cannot be taken back in police custody. Now that provision, that bar has been taken away by the advent of this provision, section 187. It says that a person can be sent to police custody, and if the offence is one which prescribes not more than 10 years of imprisonment, then this custody, police custody, can span over a period of 40 days. So if a person has been granted police custody for 5 days, he is sent to judicial custody. So after 15 days, 20 days, within a span of 40 days, police can seek police custody yet again. So that earlier bar which was there, which was also interpreted by the Supreme Court in 92, Anupam Kulkarni's case, that has been done away with, washed away, we would say. And in heinous offences where the punishment is more than 10 years, this 40 days period has been extended to 60 days. So 15 days police custody can span over 40 to 60 days depending on the offence. This, according to me, in a country like India, this is a little arbitrary, I would say, in my personal opinion, of course. So where in a country like India, where we do not trust police with the safety of any citizen when they are in the custody of the police, we do not trust police in that manner. And we are very far behind in trusting police and educating police and training police to reach that level where the citizens have faith in police. So in such a situation and in such circumstances, giving such power to police where they can seek custody even after the person has been interrogated, it seems a little arbitrary to me. Of course, had there been certain provisions attached to it whereby there could have been some protection which could have been granted, protection in the sense that in case a person has to be interrogated in police custody, all right, give him for 15 days, span it over 40 days, span it over 60 days, but let it be in the presence of an advocate, or let it be video recorded. So the safeguards have not been given. Those safeguards could have been given, and I hope that these safeguards are introduced by way of judge-made law. So this is one of the provisions which has been introduced. Though of course the positives are also there, because the investigating agency, not all police people are, my decorated police officer is sitting here, we cannot generalize the nature of the police in country, but at the same time it helps, this provision also helps in making the investigation more efficient, in making the investigation, in collecting the evidence more efficiently and in a proper manner, and of course it also avoids hasty interrogation that tends to happen in a country like India, where the offences are, the police forces are much less than the kind of offences which are being committed and the number of offences which are being committed. So in a way, of course, the provisions are there because the police is given more time to collect evidence, and the ultimate aim of criminal justice system is that, of course, no person who has actually committed the crime should be brought to the books, and the person who is innocent should be given a fair chance. So police has also been given certain powers in this case, where they can sort of investigate at their own pace and not be bogged down by the limited period of 15 days only. So while I was going through the provisions of 187, I tried to find out as to what provisions are there, similar provisions are there in other countries. I studied the law of UK as to how much maximum period which is being provided to the police of Britain for interrogation in police custody. So I was startled to see, and which made my opinion also a little more firm, that this is a little arbitrary, because in a country like England, where we trust the police more than what we do in India, So there also the maximum period which has been given to the UK police to interrogate a person in police custody is 24 hours. And in heinous offences, that period has been extended from 36 hours to 96 hours. So the maximum period in whichever offence, not more than 96 hours, a person can be in police custody. And what have we done? We have given 15 days spanning over 40 to 60 days. But I just hope that, of course, no torture or interrogation methods are used which are inhuman, and it is being used in a positive manner for the reason why it was introduced. So that's about it. I believe these 15 days, that was, and most of the things have been covered by my friend here, Kartikeya and Manish. And that's all. I just feel that whatever provisions have been introduced, a balance is created, because rights have been given to both accused as well as to the investigating agency. So these rights are to be balanced, and I would hope that judiciary, and you, me, all are part of judiciary, and we help in implementation of these provisions in a more balanced way. So, and the procedural changes that have been made, these should not be used in order to circumvent the liberties, liberties and rights, of course, which have been provided by the Constitution. So by making amendments to the procedural law, the basic structure of the Constitution which provides liberties and rights should not be hampered. That should be the, I would say, the fulcrum of the entire change. And in case we have that kind of an intention in our hearts and in our minds while applying these laws, I think this is a wonderful change that has been made in the laws. And that's about it.
Thank you, sir. Now we will be moving to our final panelist, Mr. Bhagwan Singh Hera, who is a Deputy Superintendent of Police in Punjab Police. He is working in the Bureau of Investigation and Litigation Management System, Punjab Police Headquarters, Sector 9, Chandigarh. Sir will be speaking on, sir, considering the veracity of time, we would like to know the perspective of police officers with respect to the videography of the crime that has been introduced in the BNSS and the process and the challenges that are being faced in just a brief period of time.
Can I switch over to Punjabi whenever
Of
it
course,
is convenient
of course,
for me? Because I am not that fluent in English. So I will address all the sections which my learned friends have already discussed with you. The police is basically concerned with erstwhile section 154 to 173 of CRPC. Now the often sections have changed. I am not that well versed with the new laws. But the police, the function of the police start with section 154 and ends at 173. This, obviously, these few sections summed up the all investigations. So there are certain apprehensions that the police may do or something wrong which will not ultimately lead to the final justice point. So the first is timelines. In the erstwhile CRPC, there was no time prescribed for preliminary investigations. However, there was a provision in the Punjab Police Rules, section 24, chapter 24.4, which said that if a police officer receives a complaint of a cognizable offence and he is not convinced that the offence has either taken place or as taken place as has been reported in the police station, so he can keep that offence under inquiry before registration of an FIR for 7 days. But the police, as obviously you all know, it is overburdened, overworked. The preliminary inquiry would likely go on for years altogether. Then this Lalita Kumari came into force and the timeline was fixed for 15 days. Now 15 days have been fixed. The requisite infrastructures to conduct those investigations in 15 days is not available in a police station. I hope you are all aware of the resource crunch we are facing at the police station level at present in the state of Punjab. Every police station has about average registration of 500 offences every year, which is almost 2 offences every day. And to investigate, we have 3 or 4 investigating officers. Though those investigating officers also have to perform the law and order duties. The bandobast duties, you must have heard of it. जब कोई VIP आता है आपके एरिया में तो you have to be present there till the time his visit is over. So for we are deployed 6 hours before and we have to leave our spot 2 hours up. So almost like 15 to 16 days in a month, every police officer has to perform these duties because there is too much of in election times, it multiples. So when you fix a timeline for conducting a preliminary inquiry, there is always an apprehension that a police officer may, in hurry, do something which the law doesn't even require. So this timeline, so anyway now the BNSS has come up with, we have to do it, there is no option, we have to register an FIR. Then is videography. Videography, the police is supposed to do mandatorily videography when you go for a search or you make a seizure. Recording of evidence in cases of certain offences, recording of confession, that is with the court, disposal of case property, that is with the court. So the main concern for the police officer is spot inspection and recording the entire incident of search and seizure. Now search is in two parts, search on suspicion and search during investigation. There are two different aspects. 105 we used to deal with, CRPC used to deal with search on suspicion. Supposedly a police officer while on patrolling duty has a suspicion that certain house or certain place, certain car can be or is containing something which is illegal and it has to be taken into custody, or some documents are there, or some vehicle is concealed, or some weapon is concealed. So you make a search. That is search on suspicion, that is, you have nothing to do with that. So that search on suspicion, while it can be conducted when you are on NACA, when you are on a patrolling duty, here the movement is sudden. You never know when you have to search a vehicle, when you have to conduct a personal search, when you come across a known suspect or a criminal and he is carrying a firearm. You do not know when the situation is going to arise. पता नहीं किस वक्त आपको किसकी search कब करनी पड़ जाए. So you are not always carrying a mobile phone in your hands. So it is not eventually possible. So what the police does is they first do the search and then they create a scene, which obviously reflects in the videography. So 105 we are not confident with that, but in 165 CRPC, when you are conducting a search during investigation, that time you have a previous knowledge that I am going to conduct this search in investigation of this so and so case. Either I am going to enter a premises to search for an offender or to search for some implement. So that videography is very convenient and very confidentially done. Now the mobile phone part, we have come up with the eSaksha app. It is a platform, cloud platform. So the clips, the video clips of search and seizure are saved, automatically saved, and they are preserved and integrated with ICGS, which is the platform of the judiciary. Then we come to my learned friend pointed out, section 167, the erstwhile section, which deals with the custody of the accused for interrogation or investigation. Earlier in the CRPC, there was a provision that once a person is arrested, he can be taken on police remand for in a period of only 15 days. After the lapse of 15 days, your right to take custody of that person or automatically forfeits. So where it hurts the police and where it hurts the accused. The interrogation now, I can assure you the interrogations are 100% humane now. We do not have to resort to the primitive methods of interrogation because we have access to other sources, like we have the mobile phones, we have call details, we have CCTV cameras. So we don't have to resort to those primitive ways कि भी कौन था, कहाँ था, किसके था, किसके पास क्या था. So everything is now recorded in a CCTV camera. So we have a very accurate footages, and we have the call details, we have the location details of the accused at the time of incidents. So interrogation is now we do not resort to those methods which our forefather used to do when the police did not have access to these aids of investigation.
Thank you, sir. That was very insightful. Okay. I'm sorry I had to interrupt due to the paucity of time.
Okay.
We have the members of the bar here as well who would like to indulge in some further discussion. If anyone has any questions regarding the conversation that took place. Yes, please.
My question is that, like, enthusiasm is very good in life, but when it comes to police, sometimes over enthusiasm leads to
larger than life. Everybody wants to portray a larger than life image of himself. That is the problem with every human beings. So, but the law has a way of putting the things in the right perspective.
My question is regarding bail. As we discussed, the custody part has now exceeded. Police custody is now spanned over 60 days and 40 days. What happens when one person was sent to police custody, then his police custody was taken back, was sent to judicial custody. Earlier we knew that the person would not be sent to police custody, we filed the bail, we got the bail. Now, during those 60 days, if we file the bail, this question was also taken up by Justice Madan Lokur. He said, what happens if a person files bail during the period of that 60 days? Does the judge automatically say that the period the police still has the authority to take the police custody again? So, will he keep the bail pending? Will he decide it on merit? That will create a lacuna, that will create a problem for every person filing for a bail.
Exactly. You are very right. The by default ना कोई भी bail application कोई भी file करता ना by default police उसको oppose करती है, as you have seen in the courts. Now, with the aid of this section 167, erstwhile 167, now we can obviously say in the court that if you grant him bail within these 60 days or within these 90 days, our right is forfeited. So, we have a right of investigation. So, the court is unable to grant a bail in those days.
So, is your question directed to sir or anyone else?
It's directed to anyone because my question spans because Karthik sir also dealt with this, sir also dealt with this, and the police also has to make a point. But what happens is, if the bail is filed, that de facto gets rejected on the ground that it is not the right time to file the bail.
It will prejudice the
Even though it is
investigation.
good on merits, it will somewhat be declined.
It virtually creates a situation where you will not get paid for 60 only 90
days.
That is the
That
what was actually, this is the procedure that trial courts also file offences which are of a lesser offence. If you see, they drag your petitions for 60 days, they report for one report, for this report, they take it close to 60 days, 45 days, 50 days, and then they'll bail you off. I think they picked up that trend and introduced it in black and white in the book that for 60, 90 days don't file your bail petition because this is going to happen.
So, I don't file the bail for that.
Yes,
there's a safeguard, I would say, in case we can interpret it that way. So it has to be, the satisfaction of the court has to be recorded. So the court can always say that they have to come up, as in the police. Police has to come up with some cogent reason as to why they would require the police custody again. Is there a new fact which has come to the notice during investigation? So of course there is an extra duty which has been cast, an extra responsibility I would say which has been cast upon the judiciary, the judge who would be deciding. So there is no bar in grant of bail during that 60 or 40 day period, but at the same time, yes. So an extra paragraph will have to be introduced in the order while granting or denying bail. Yes, so it has to be justified basically.
So if anyone else has some questions for the panelists. So we'll be ending this session on this note. So special thanks to Honorable Chief Justice of Punjab and High Court, Dr. Sheel Nagoo, for his visionary leadership and unwavering commitment to the legal profession. And a special thanks to Mr. Suvir Sidhu, Member Bar Council of India, for organizing this event and for his significant contributions and efforts in making this event a resounding success. I would also like to thank the panelists for taking out some valuable time for their schedules. It is a Monday, so we know it is a very busy day, but still you could take out time. We are very thankful. And also to the members of the bar, considering that it is a Monday again, so you all must be very busy. But thank you so much for coming here and being a part of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.